Hi, I'm Rachel Lancaster, and this is the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started, and the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife and sharing some fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now's our time. There certainly seems to be a couple of new themes for season 3 of my podcast. One of them is that I'm talking to a lot of other fabulous midlife podcasters, and the other one is that they come in duplicate. So today we have another episode where we have 2 wonderful guests. So we have Janine Queenin and Nicole Markel from the Messy Middle Roadtrip Podcast. And these are fabulous ladies. They're going to tell us all sorts of wonderful things. So welcome.
Hi, Rachel.
Thanks for having us
on.
So I'm going to kick off. It's a great name for a podcast. I just absolutely love it. So why did you decide to start it, and how did you come up with the name?
Good question. Janine, do you want to talk about the origin story?
Sure. So Nicole and I have known each other for more than 10 years, and we met each other in a writing group, and just independently, we thought to ourselves, wouldn't it be cool to put together a podcast? But we've both been going through the same journey, getting to midlife. Our kids are getting older, trying to decide what to do next, and then hearing the same thing from our friends. You know, the question of what's my purpose now? How do I define myself as a woman? And it just sort of came about naturally because of that, you know, hoping to find answers for ourselves, but to give information to other women as well.
And I think the impetus for the theme and the logo that we came up with, we started brainstorming about other women duos that have come before us. And we really thought about the journey, and one thing led to another, and we were brainstorming and said, how about a blue convertible driving in the desert on Route 66? And then we started talking about Thelma and Louise and that whole journey. And of course, without going off the cliff, clearly, at the end.
Or murdering anyone or killing anyone.
Exactly.
Without the murder and mayhem.
Without the murder and mayhem, but all the fun and the laughter and the conversations, and just having that girl time and women supporting women and being able to share it together, because we are on this journey together. And I think it makes it less scary and more brilliant. You are able to join and link arms with others that are in the same boat.
And I think we also like the visual of a road trip, because, you know, life is like a road trip. There's all sorts of exciting things that happen. And then we were able to bring all that visual piece into the podcast too. We like that.
Yeah, it's some great visuals, and I love the whole Thelma and Louise concept. It's brilliant. And you've shared some incredible stories through the whole course of doing your podcast. There are some fabulous episodes, so I would encourage everybody to go and listen. But why do you think midlife is messy?
We're not taught what to expect in midlife. There's no guidelines. I suppose each phase of growing and learning, you don't really have a roadmap. You know, I can remember parenting, I felt that way. I felt like I was thrown in the deep end of the pool. But I think that there's a lot of stigma attached to perimenopause and midlife. And my memories of seeing my mother and my grandmother go through that are strange. There was nothing positive about it. It was just complaining about having a hot flash, or maybe something, you know, irritable because they weren't sleeping well, and all these things. And I can remember bits and pieces, but nobody ever sat us down to talk about that or to share how amazing it can be, which is kind of our perspective, that it's not as scary as people make it out to be. And I love this part of my life. I would never go back.
And I think that for women who have kids, it's a big transition, because a lot of us put our careers on the back burner. Maybe we did jobs that were, you know, just for part-time or something, so we could be home more often, or really made a career shift in order to take care of the kids. And then the kids leave and we're saying, okay, we have all this time. Who do I want to be? Like, what is my next plan? But it's hard. It's hard to figure that out, something that is gratifying and makes sense for you as a person. So I think that is something that's an important conversation to have as well.
It's so important, isn't it? Because it is the middle. There is so much more left and lots of exciting things to do, and get on that messy middle road trip and go and explore and find out all sorts of things, isn't it? But yeah, we don't talk about it. It's almost as if there is this sort of metaphorical cliff in midlife and we all just fall off it. And what happens?
Yeah, definitely. And like Nicole was saying too, we've been taught to be embarrassed about the change in life because, first of all, we're so, especially in the United States, we're so consumed with looks and youth and, everything that goes with that. So we almost become invisible at a certain age where in fact we're most skilled, most experienced, most worldly. And you'd think that we would be the person everyone wants to talk to, but it's not really that. So it's that's a hard adjustment as well.
I think the whole invisibility thing is really interesting, but do you think it's mostly society, or do you think we do it a bit to ourselves as well, that we sort of accept this concept and go along with it?
I think society drives it. I think media drives it. I think there are many women that are fighting against that and trying to change that. But I see it with my children and what they see when they are tuning into their television shows or their social media and who they follow, the YouTubers that they are into. And it is such a youth-driven consumerism that we have in the world, not just in the US. And everybody buys into that. And it really, there's a whole market of people that are untapped, and it's us sitting in the middle in this pocket. We are the ones who are generally in charge of the spending in our homes. We are the ones that are usually running the households and making those decisions. And we have a power that comes with that, power to change the dynamic, I think.
But I agree with you, Rachel, that there's certainly a portion of that we do to ourselves. I think women are we're our own hardest critics, and we are the greatest critics of other women.
Yes.
So
yes, we are.
I mean, you see that everywhere. So it certainly is not helping us that we have this poor self-talk, but then we let the opinions of other people affect us as well. We kind of maybe shrink into ourselves a little bit or want to be less conspicuous, or I don't know what it is, but I definitely agree. There's it's both.
So
sure.
We all need to hop into the back of that convertible and wave our arms around and make lots of noise, don't we?
Right,
agreed.
Right. Yes. Turn up the radio and do what we want. Yeah. And I know, definitely.
So for both of you, the podcast is your side gig. So what do each of you do as your main gig?
So I started a travel company called Storied Adventures about 4 years ago. And I did it because first I like to travel and I like to plan things, but I wanted to create a company for people who really are looking for experiential opportunities to see the world, but also who want to unplug and then reconnect with their families and friends in a meaningful way. So I think we're so busy and we're so on our devices all the time that travel is a nice time to break free of that and really spend quality time together, especially with kids. So I did start that 4 years ago, and we do incorporate that a little bit into the podcast, as does Nicole with her business, which she'll talk about. Because I think that in midlife, you have more freedom to travel, and it's good to travel with your kids, but as they get older, it's easier, and the world is wide open to you.
And I started a business right around the same time 4 years ago with a non-toxic wellness company. And I'm excited because I get to empower other people to make healthier choices with personal care and cleaning products. And I educate. And prior to joining my company, I was not a label reader. I bought things on the end cap. I bought things that were on sale, or if it had a green leaf on it, or it said that it was natural or safe, I was buying it for my kiddos. And I got really angry when it was pointed out to me that there were actually harmful ingredients in the products that I was using. So I wanted to be the pebble that created the ripple and affect change by sharing this information, because I thought, here I am, I'm 48 years old, at the time 44, and I had never been taught any of this. There had to be hundreds of thousands of people out there that needed to know this information. So it was my responsibility, felt pulled to share this information and shout it from the rooftops. And the subsequent health journey that has come from that for me has been really personable and really eye-opening, and it's the best decision I've ever made. So I love what I do.
And it was actually, you got sick, didn't you? That was what drove you to make these changes.
I did. I had been sick for a long time at that point. My youngest daughter is 12. And when she was a year old, I was scheduled to go on a 4th of July weekend holiday with my husband and our 2 daughters. And I went to get out of bed that morning and literally could not move. I had to roll out of bed. I felt like I got hit by a freight train, and I couldn't lift my arms to wash my hair in the shower. I couldn't put my bra on. It was like mirrored joint pain all the way through my body. And it was acute because the day before I was fine. And I consider myself to be a healthy person. I have a dance background. I've danced since the age of 6. And as I've gotten older, I've transitioned that into more yoga and stretching and spinning classes. But to have that hit me like that, it was so scary. And I was in tears coming out of the shower. My poor husband asked, "Do you still want to go on this trip?" And I said, "Yes, we promised the kids we're going to do this." But then I find myself flash forward a few hours, standing a few steps off the boardwalk in the sand, trying to hold my infant daughter, and afraid I was going to drop her because I had no strength. I had no ability to hold her, and I was crying on the beach, and my poor husband was schlepping everything out to where we were sitting. And it took me a very long time to find a diagnosis because it was the summer months and all the doctors and specialists were on vacation. So it was waiting for appointments and waiting for bone scans and all these things. We were self-diagnosing on Google, and WebMD, thinking it might be Lyme disease. It ended up being psoriatic arthritis, which surprised my doctor because at the time I was in my 30s, and he said I was very young to have something like that, especially because I was so healthy and the arthritis portion was not showing up on my bone scans. But based on my symptoms and what I was going through with my visible psoriasis, which was mostly on my scalp at that point, it was awful. I had itching so badly that my scalp was bleeding and scabbed. And again, here I am with a newborn. So I had no sleep. My stress level was high. It was tough. And I had a lot of years where I just listened to the regular medical doctors and they put me on a myriad of different types of drugs. And I was very afraid of the side effects. I was afraid that lymphoma or skin cancer was going to be in my future. And I didn't want that. I thought to myself, I'd much rather have arthritis than have to deal with lymphoma and the potential loss of my life and not be here for my family. So it was really about 4 years ago where I started looking at my product piece. And since then that has morphed into a journey with rehauling my diet and just really digging into self-care and trying to be the best version of myself. And it's been eye-opening and again, a journey that I would never want to go back. I love where I am right now.
And how are you wellness-wise now?
So I'm currently working with a naturopath and my arthritis is completely in remission.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Wow.
Because that was debilitating, 100%. My psoriasis is doing well. It is healing. I think that piece is taking longer for me because I did find I had muscle testing done with a specialist, and we determined that I have an intolerance. I cannot have gluten. I cannot have any type of grain, which includes corn. And corn, as you know, is in everything, including things like maple syrup and honey.
Yeah.
I cannot do dairy. I just found out I cannot do eggs.
Oh my goodness.
I'm very limited with what I can and cannot eat. And every now and then I will eat something that perhaps it's been tainted with butter, or maybe I just need a little bit of ketchup and I shouldn't be eating nightshades. And it'll flare my psoriasis a little bit, but I'm working with a new naturopath, and he has me on a supplement protocol, and I'm confident that we're going to get a handle on it. And he's also looking at other things that affect perimenopause with adrenal fatigue. I've been going through that. Also looking at a liver detox, because for years I was on a medicine called methotrexate, which is actually used for cancer treatment. And you have to have blood work consistently. And if you're on it for a long period of time, you have to have a liver biopsy. And even though my blood work came back clean, it definitely damaged my liver. So we're looking to reset that. And that's the beautiful thing about our bodies, that they are so smart that they can rebuild and reset themselves if given the proper care. So that's my goal for 2020, is to get my psoriasis in complete remission as well. But I will keep the path with the non-toxic products and eating clean and exercising and all that good stuff.
Oh.
I love that you said it was tainted with butter.
In my world, it is tainted, and I know butter is amazing.
But it's absolutely fascinating, isn't it, that you, by changing your lifestyle, changing your diet, changing the products you used, you were able to effect such enormous change. Janine, did you see this change?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't want to tell stories unless I don't want to tell Nicole stories.
You can tell stories. That's okay. We're being open. I was probably a crab because I went through a really crabby, depressed, bummed out period at the beginning. I remember
you're lovely. You're lovely all the time.
Lies. It's all lies.
But we would do a walkathon in support of a friend who had breast cancer. And it was a 3K. No, what was it? 5K. Mm-hmm. And I just remember Nicole not being able to do it. I mean, we were only in our early 40s at the time. And I remember her suffering, and she would just kind of bear down and do it. But I could tell that she was in pain. And
because it was cold. Really not it was usually at the end of October, and we would be cold. Yeah. And it would take me days after that walk. And here we were celebrating our friend Linda, who went through double mastectomy breast cancer. And I had nothing to complain about in my mind, but I can remember being laid out for days after the walk because my joints were on fire, and that was on medicine. So that was tough. It's great to be off all the meds at this point. I love it.
I just think that's incredible. I really do. I think it's absolutely incredible. And the fact that you talked about that you didn't look at labels. I think we buy into these things. We think they're safe, don't we? I mean, anybody can put organic on a product. There's no, or tested in a laboratory. Was it the home laboratory in the garage, and it was one person who put on a white coat so it looked official. Literally, that there's no regulation of that, is there?
None. No, the FDA has no regulation on products. They get involved when there's SPF. So if you're talking about a sunscreen, yes, or maybe a face lotion that has any type of SPF, then they get involved. There's all sorts of red tape. But across the board, manufacturers are self-policing. And that's why you find things, for example, like the ingredient fragrance. That is not an actual ingredient. Fragrance is an umbrella term used in the industry that hides hundreds of thousands of ingredients under that one phrase. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you'll see it as perfume or parfum on an ingredient label. And they get away with a lot. They can hide so much under there, and nobody's the wiser. There's no testing. It's pretty scary stuff.
So I know that there's it's much worse in the States than it is in Europe. There are a lot of products in Europe that we're not allowed to have in personal care products, for example, or cleaning products.
Absolutely.
But most products will still have fragrance, and who knows what's in there.
Exactly. And it's interesting because something that I usually share with people at my gatherings that I do in the States, right now we only ban 11 harmful ingredients, and in Europe they ban over 1,300. Ooh. But there's over 90,000 known ingredients, some of which are harmful. So those numbers are so small in comparison to what is actually out there. So yes, Europe is well ahead of the curve as compared to the US, but we still all got a long way to go.
And I have this theory that a lot of these sort of reactions to things that we've always worked reasonably well with, they come in midlife. I think when our hormones start to change, and I'm always talking about how I see menopause symptoms as the canary in the coal mine. It's like, start listening to your body, because your body's trying to tell you something. Don't just stick a Band-Aid on it, have the hormone therapy and not deal with the underlying issues, because something's going on in most instances, I find, whether it's you need to cut back on your caffeine or your sugar or your processed goods, or do more exercise or start stretching or whatever, or meditate for anxiety, whatever it might be. It's important to listen, isn't it? And you did start listening.
I did. I had no choice. I did not like who I was when I was sick, and I was missing a lot. And it was interesting. My mother actually pointed it out to me. At the time, I was working a job as an executive secretary for a superintendent of schools. So I was working 60 hours a week, a lot of night meetings that I had to attend. And I was missing out on my girls. They were at school, they were at daycare afterwards, and I was having to have babysitters take care of them. And I wasn't getting home sometimes at night until midnight. It was awful. And you can imagine how much pain I was in with that. And just remember thinking to myself, why am I doing this? Because my mom pointed out, Nicole, you are not one to lose your temper. You are always even keel, but you're snapping at the kids, because my stress level was so high and I was in so much pain. And I didn't want to be that person. And I'm glad that she pointed that out to me, because when you're in it and you're not feeling well, you are your own worst enemy, and you just fall into that. And I had to leave a number of groups of that, because people were just filled with despair and loss of hope, and talking about being on disability and mourning the loss of the things that they loved to do, whether that was gardening or jumping on the trampoline with their children or whatever. And I said, I can't be in these groups anymore. There has to be more positive people that are looking towards natural solutions. And I was very lucky that I found a group. There's a woman, Karen, who I've become very good Facebook friends. I keep saying we're going to meet up in Arizona someday, because she travels down to a house in Arizona. And she runs a natural group for psoriatic arthritis support. And I've learned so much from her. And she's gone on she was in the same boat I was in, and she had a reawakening and became an EMT and works on a rig. And she's completely naturally healed from her psoriatic arthritis. And she's amazing.
What's an EMT?
She's an emergency medical technician. So it's somebody who's on an ambulance rig. So she's lifting people that are twice her body weight. And we had her on the podcast, and she's just an amazing spirit. And she's a badass. She's a grandmother. And here she had this reawakening of who she wanted to be and what she wanted to do with her life. And she did not let her disease define her, which I love.
I think it's really interesting that both of you also, as well as starting the podcast, you both started businesses in midlife. So Janine, tell me a bit about starting your business and how you went about creating that. And I know sustainable travel is an important element to what you're doing, isn't it? So both of you have got this sort of environmental hat on, that you're worried about the future.
Well, I wish I could say that I had this grand plan when I started. So luckily I did find, and I think it's super important, especially if you're going into a new field, to find a mentor and people who can help you get started. Because I didn't have any experience running a business. So it's been, I imagine for most women who decide to take that leap, it's trial and error. And I certainly have had a lot of errors, but I think now that it's starting to come around. But what I liked about it, because of course you have the flexibility, and because I'm in midlife, I didn't want a boss. I wanted to be the boss, and I want the flexibility to be able to travel, which is part of my job now, which is lovely. But also to do what I want when I want. So there aren't a lot of jobs that allow you to do that. So that was one of the reasons for starting the business. And of course, I've always been attracted to travel because I enjoy it like most people. So finding a way to create a business out of that was super important to me. And sustainable travel, I think, it's becoming trendy, but it's important because of course there's more focus on global warming, on climate change. And if you look at just what happened in Venice, so I know that has a lot to do with climate change, but of course, then I heard people who are in charge, they are talking about the number of cruise ships that go in, the damage that's done to the harbor, just the over tourism in certain places around the world. We're really destroying the places we love. And, it does have a lot to do with easy accessibility of tourism, more people traveling, and cruise ships. I don't want to, criticize cruise ships, but you think about it, there are just these mega ships going into these ports and dumping 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people at once. Multiple ships during a day. I mean, it causes tremendous amount of damage. So I think it's important to remember that we can still love these places and visit, but do it responsibly.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to consider, aren't there? I mean, I don't know when we're all going to stop using airplanes. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, is it? But well,
I think that's almost an impossible dream. You think about, because of the global economy. I mean, people travel. I mean, people do more of this video conferencing, but you think about businesses run the global, and I think that will be hard to have happen. And I was listening to something on our NPR public radio about electric planes, which apparently can never happen because they just don't have the power. They just couldn't make the flight, but it was interesting either way to think about.
What's greenwashing? I know this is something you've covered on your podcast.
Greenwashing is definitely something that I experienced before I started my journey with my wellness company. That is when manufacturers will market something with green leaves and trees and happy babies and catchwords like hyperallergenic, natural, safe, pure. But when you flip that bottle around and you start looking at the ingredients list, you realize that it contains things that contain petroleum and phthalates, and which are endocrine disruptors. It might contain dyes, and you really have to stop and think, it's not really as green as it's saying it is. The other thing that's interesting is when you have a very good company, it might be a mom and pop company that is created with a purpose of being natural and safer for the environment. But over time, those companies get very good offers from very big manufacturing companies who come in, swoop in, they purchase those mom and pops, and they change the formulations without any of us being the wiser. And that has happened across the board with, Method, with Tom's of Maine. You don't
Body
know.
Shop.
Yes,
Body
absolutely. And it's interesting because if you Google it and you ask who owns this company, they'll tell you, but it's not marketed that way. So if you're continuing to buy those products, you just think everything's hunky-dory moving forward. But people have said to me, well, why would they change the formulations? And I asked them this question from a business perspective. I said, look at it this way. If you have a big manufacturing company and they own 7 companies, because there's really only 7 huge manufacturing companies globally, and then they own all the smaller companies. So if you have a manufacturer that owns 7 companies and they do the same thing for their business practices with creating the products, packaging them, etc., marketing them across the board, and then they purchase the small mom and pop and add them to the mix, well, they're going to be using their same facility to make those products. somebody said the other day they bought Tom's of Maine toothpaste, and it was in a Colgate tube. It was the same exact style. Well, guess what? Tom's of Maine was bought out by Colgate.
Yeah.
So again, it's going through the same processes. It makes you question, are they still going to keep their organic manufacturing process for this one company when they can save money and do it like they're doing for the rest? They might tweak it a little bit so that it's cleaner, but it's not 100%. So you just really have to go in with eyes wide open. And oftentimes we're hit unaware. I know I was going to a salon that was an Aveda branded salon, and Aveda is known to be plant-based and wellness, and they help build wells for their lavender farmers. And, they're very eco-friendly, and sustainability is a big push for them. But my hairdresser was having atopic dermatitis from her fingertips to her elbows because her hands were constantly in the water using the products. And she said to her owner, something's different. And the owner said, well, we're an Aveda branded salon, and this is how I'm running my business. And it's unfortunate that you're having this reaction. So my hairdresser decided to leave and go open her own chair somewhere else and use her own products. As soon as she did that and she stopped using Aveda, the dermatitis went away. And then we did a little research and come to find out they were bought out by Estee Lauder. So again, they changed things, which is such a bummer, because when you have a good company that is eco-friendly and they are safe, and then they sell out, it's there again with the no regulation. It's so hard to stay on top of it. You just, as a consumer, we have to pay attention.
And I just know as well that, my skin is so much drier and more sensitive now than it used to be. I've always had sensitive skin. I've always had to be careful. But now I can't put anything on my skin that isn't, completely organic, that hasn't got anything in it. Otherwise, it might say it's going to moisturize, but it just dries it out.
Absolutely. And people don't often think even about their laundry detergent. That's a big piece because that can really affect your skin. I know we're seeing more and more eczema and dermatitis and psoriasis. And you think about your laundry detergent, unless you're living in a nudist colony, you have some type of clothing or fabric touching your body all day, every day. Your sheets, your towels, your clothing. If you're wrapped up on the couch watching television, you have a blanket around you. It's constant exposure. And even those laundry detergents that say free and clear doesn't mean that it's 100% free and clear. A lot of times they still have fragrance, which hides those ingredients.
And then it is the vapors as well, isn't it? I have a friend who's had terrible problems with her lungs. And she was told to go completely natural at home with all her cleaning products. Don't use air freshener, nothing like that.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
all the particles are going inside and then causing irritation.
And we often don't even think about our pets, because we're cleaning with those products. We're inhaling them. Well, so are our pets and our children. And they are much smaller, and it can affect them much more than it does a grown adult. But yes, the air quality in our homes, especially as we move into the colder, darker months where everything's closed up and we have that forced hot air kicking around. Yeah, if you're using bleach in your bathroom, you could really damage your lungs, and it could cause issues with brain activity and skin if you're touching it. Absolutely.
And we don't know what the long-term effects are, do we? I mean, you do, you've encountered them, but many of us don't know those and don't realize until it's too late.
Absolutely.
Wow. Changing tack slightly. It's a scary world out there, isn't it?
It's so scary.
No, but it is when you know it is. So it's just, I suppose, biggest advice, I guess, is just check your labels, right?
It really is. And you don't have to be an expert. You can choose one or two things that you just really want to avoid. Especially for me having children, phthalates is a big piece. Phthalates is usually in fragrance. And phthalates are endocrine disruptors. And the crazy thing with that is it's mutagenic. And what that means is when you're exposed to phthalates, I have the ability to pass that on to my grandchildren with the probability that their risk for infertility is higher because it's an endocrine disruptor. And it can really, and we're starting to see a rise in infertility with women and men. And they're really pulling more research to know. And it's not just the products, it's what type of pans are you cooking in? Do you have flame retardant on your furniture? All these things that are just adding up for toxic body burden and how it can affect us. We see those sci-fi movies where there are worlds where people stop having children because it's something that you can no longer do. Everybody's gone infertile, and it's here we're seeing signs of that. So let's work now to clean that up. Let's not wait 10, 20, 30 years where we're in that pickle. So I want to try to affect change now on that.
And I'm convinced that in the West, and particularly in the US and the UK, we have a worse experience of menopause because of all of these issues, because everything is affecting us.
I agree with you.
Absolutely. Me too.
I agree. I actually met a woman she grew up in India, and she worked for our company for a little bit as a product development person. And she said she didn't have to read her labels until she came to the States, because in India, everything was seasonal. So whatever they ate, whatever they used for products, there was no preservatives. It was you used it seasonally. And then once that was gone and it moved to the next season, well, then that's what you use moving forward. And she said it was very eye-opening to her to come to the States and really just have to dig in and be knowledgeable about what she was using.
So I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours, but I also want to ask you about some of your favorite people that you've met on the podcast, because there are some absolutely incredible stories there. And I think the three of us, we all like telling stories, don't we? So Janine, why don't you kick off? Tell me maybe, your couple of your favorite guests that you've had, or favorite things that you've learned.
So I've learned a ton. And one of the things that I've learned is that midlife is not the end at all. There's so many opportunities to do just amazing things. If you decide to do it, it's make the choice to take the step and take the chance. I think one of the guests that impacted me the most, and it was probably the saddest story I've heard in a long time. We had a woman named Becky Savage on who lost both of her sons in the same night to an opiate overdose. And they were good kids, college bound, just kids. And they made a terrible mistake. And I learned a lot about what's going on. I do have teenagers, so I try not to be naive. I try to keep up, but really made me understand how little we do know about the private lives of teenagers and college students, and why it's so important to be aware of this and to tell my kids that, the people are going into their parents' or grandparents' medicine cabinets and then taking these pills to parties and kids are dying from it. So it was the most heartbreaking show we've done, but I think it's so important for parents of teenagers and college age kids to listen to, and middle schoolers too. I mean, I don't want to be naive and think kids aren't doing that. So that was very important. And then just everybody willing to come on and tell their personal stories. I mean, we've had people who went from a kindergarten teacher to being a medium. And we had, really interesting things, and people coming on to talk about their journeys with colon cancer and breast cancer. I mean, it's really amazing. First of all, the spirit of these women, but also their willingness to share with other women and give them the information they need to live a healthy life as well.
We do that better than men, don't we? Sharing and learning and staying curious and wanting to find out about things, I think.
I think so too. And I think it's important too, because I don't know why we hide this information, why we don't talk more about health issues or perimenopause. And that's the only way to really know that you're supported. Plus, find out information. I mean, I suppose we could all Google it, but to really talk to someone who's gone through it already, I find that to be enormously helpful.
So Nicole, what are your favorite people or topics?
Well, I think the most exciting one we had was really an underdog story. We interviewed Sandy Zimmerman. She's an American Ninja Warrior, if any of you have ever seen that show.
I have. It's a lot of fun.
She is out in Spokane, Washington, and she made her qualifying run. She was the first mom and the oldest woman to hit the buzzer for her run.
Wow.
And when I saw that happen, I said to Janine, I'm going to reach out to her. I'm getting more bold. Just going to ask if she'll be on the podcast, because I think it would be so cool to talk with her. And I had heard some stories and some interviews that she had done. And she had a very personal story about how she grew up. She grew up in poverty, and she had suffered abuse and really struggled as a child with self-esteem issues and knowing what she wanted to do. And now she's a physical education teacher, and she and her family built a ninja gym in her backyard, and she teaches ninja classes, and she's empowered her kids. And like, the life that she and her husband are giving her children now is amazing. And they cheer her on. They are her biggest fans. And just seeing her journey. And she also had a major health issue where she had 2 knee surgeries happen at the same time, and the recovery from that and the dark period that she was in, and how she came back to fight against and win her regional heat. She did not make it to the finals, but that's not stopping her. She's coming back for more. She's back at it with training, which is awesome. So I loved hearing that. And then we just recently interviewed somebody, and the show hasn't come out yet. Her name is Amy Pence Brown, and she has a video that's gone viral. She did an art installation in an Idaho farmer's market in the middle of summer, where she took off her dress and stripped down to a bra and an underwear and blindfolded herself with washable markers. And she had a sign resting on her feet that said something to the effect of, if you have ever experienced body shaming or felt uncomfortable in your own skin, write a heart on my body, because she was making a stand for body image and positivity and embracing who you are. And she's a beautiful soul. And the video and the photographs from that make me cry every time I watch it, because people were crying as they were drawing hearts on her body and whispering things to her. And to just hear her journey and all the positivity that she has put out in the world, and creating these camps for teenagers and adults, and just support groups for people to be comfortable with who they are. And she describes herself as a fat mother with a big mouth and something to say. And she's taking back the power for the word fat, because it is so negative when you hear that. And she's like, I am fat, but I'm healthy, and I'm smart, and I'm beautiful, and this is who I am. And she's a great marriage and awesome kids. And like, she was really cool to interview. So I think that's been the neat thing, is we get tickled when somebody says yes to us. And so I'm not done asking. I'm going to just keep on. If I find somebody that I love their story and I love what they have to say, I'm going to ask.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, share it, and maybe leave me a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening. You can find out more information about this episode in the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you'll find strategies, support, and resources to help make your midlife magnificent. There's a wellness program, courses, midlife mentoring to help make the most of your next chapter, and our online members club. Because life's just too short for plain biscuits. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.